Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our MCT Geocoding and Bid Tape Protection Initiatives webinar. For those of you that have joined our past webinars, we're gonna, you know that we give it a couple more minutes, so we're gonna wait till 11:03 Pacific here. We've got another 100 or so people joining, so. We will be back to you at 11:03 Pacific. Well, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Appreciate everybody for joining this webinar. Again, this is really a webinar that circles back to an initiative that we had pushed. We had pushed on the industry about 5 years ago, a year after we had deployed Bid Auction Manager, BAM, our bid tape platform. In 2017, we had basically prior to 2017, we had the industry basically emailing literally tens of thousands of property addresses every day, back and forth between lenders, hedge advisors like MCT, and aggregators and any potential loan buyers. And we were able to secure the data in transit by creating Bid Auction Manager. But the next step that we knew we wanted to do for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about, was encrypting the data, not just in transit, but encrypting it at rest. And the only way to really do that, because the majority of buyers were in, were set up to buy loans from Excel, basically Excel worksheets, was to remove the property address. And so that's why we, titled this webinar Geocoding and Bid Tape Protection Initiative. So we'll go through a variety of reasons on why we pulled back that initiative in 2018, but now, just because of some cybersecurity incidents that have been specific to our industry as of late, we think now's the time, especially with some of the technology improvements that have occurred in the industry. Now's the time to really push this across the industry, and we feel we're best placed to do that. So Today, as presenters, we have myself, Phil Rasori. I'm Chief Operating Officer of MCT. We have Chris Anderson, the Chief Administrative Officer of MCT. A lot of you guys know Chris, and I should take a step back, actually. For the clients on the line, a lot of this will be review. We obviously had a specific webinar about this a couple months ago. There is some new stuff, but just fair warning there that for the clients on the line, you may hear some stuff that you've heard a couple months ago. We also have Justin Grant, who is head of our investor services, and he's going to talk about kind of how we're going to make this transition with respect to bid tapes and the communication of some MPI data fields like property address, and how we transition that to a geocode information. So with regards to the agenda, we're going to first go through kind of the history of the borrower data in the loan sale process. I know I touched on that for a second. One that's not quite as obvious as the NPI issue is the MSR consequences. Justin's going to talk about this, but I do want to just touch on this now. Look, MCT, it's a big risk. We feel this is a responsibility of MCT to work with the industry to remove property address from the bid tape. And one of the reasons it's MCT's responsibility is we were responsible for moving the market from a situation starting in basically 2012, where you had 2 or 3 investors, to the proliferation that we had starting in 2013 and into 2014 of new investors only able to accept bid tapes at that time. And what we did, of course, is we really pushed our clients, our lender customers, because there was better execution to be had out there, to start including all of these potential buyers in their best executions. So now we went from a situation where we were a lender may have been sending out this bid tape to 4 potential buyers, one of which actually bought the loan, right? So there was 3 buyers who didn't get the loan but had the data, to now where Justin will show you the graph, we may be sending this out to over 20 potential buyers, and only 1 actually gets the loan. Obviously, only 1 buyer actually wins the loan. So there's now 19 that have this data. So it doesn't take a MSR genius to figure out the potential issues there when you have perfect data on this loan. In the event that if and when the market were to reverse and rates were to come down, that information is hanging out there, and potentially can have negative MSR consequences. So from a buyer that buys a large, that if you have a high win rate, you are even more motivated to work with us to remove this property address from the bid tape. So replacing, we're talking about how we're going to replace the property address with geocoding, loan number. Talk a little bit about that, and then Chris Anderson is going to round it out with just data security in general, and some of the work that he's done with our LOS partners and vendor partners to really limit the amount of data that a hedge advisor or any secondary marketing vendor really needs, and also talk a little bit about what we do here at MCT from a data security perspective.
And Phil, I just wanted to, chime in and thank you very much for sending me the message that this was a dress down day. I clearly have overdressed, but what can you do? When you're not as handsome as these guys, you got to take any move you can make.
So no, I appreciate that, Chris. And we were talking earlier. We were a little concerned that this webinar may not fill up an entire hour, and then once I realized that Chris was on the was on the presenter list, that concern evaporated rapidly. So
Touche,
so,
sir. Touche. Timing though, I was quiet for several minutes there, sir.
So moving to the data security in the loan sale process, this is where I will transition it to Justin. Again, I would say that for those clients of ours and the investors, there's a lot of investors, there's a lot of buyers on the line right now. Look, we had a lot of these discussions in 2018. We appreciate a lot of you guys worked very hard in 2018 to work with our geocoding to be able to take, because and Justin will talk about this with the CRA benefits, but we did. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. The issue is that the industry just wasn't ready in 2018 to be able to get these. The industry just didn't have the ability to take these geocodes and have them materialize. And I into pricing benefits for across all buyers, but some buyers, and again, we want to thank buyers that worked with us, and your work was not in vain, because now it is time to make this transition. And I just want to definitely credit Freddie Mac as well with their income limits API. They definitely the entire I think that's a big change for the industry, that the industry is able to now get this this AMI information, because obviously with FHFA's AMI FTHB LLPA waiver, that's a big change, right? That's the first time that now AMI information has become a legitimate decision maker or a legitimate effect on LLPAs. So just wanted to thank everyone for kind of working with us, and now's the time, I think, to really make this change. So with that, Justin, I will pass it over to you.
All right, yeah, thanks, Phil. And not to kind of beat a dead horse here, but did kind of want to go over a little bit of kind of the evolution of that bid tape. I know we've got a lot of industry folks on the call who aren't MCT clients. Some of you, may be newer to, the bid process, not on some of our previous webinars. So if you kind of go back to 2012, 2013, where at the time we were, thinking lows and rates, you had this huge interest from investors that wanted to get into space. The MSR asset was really in vogue, and that's kind of really where you saw, a lot of the investors that are here today, quite frankly, start to step into the market. And, prior to that, coming off the financial crisis, I mean, really everybody that was doing business then remembers there were probably 3 or 4 or 5 investors, pretty much all banks, that they were selling to. And, the newer investors that were stepping in, they didn't have the time or the resources to stand up a bid, a desk and develop, note rate adjusters and all these things that the investors offered at the time. And really they wanted to transact via bid tape. And frankly, they liked that better because they could get a little more information on the loan. And those of you that remember calling into the old mandatory desks, all you had to give was product, coupon or rate and loan amount. And that was all the investor knew at the time about the loan that they were getting. So it was, I think everybody would agree that more information is better, right? And so as we, MCT was, we really pioneered helping these newer buyers in the space, and really built BAM, to facilitate the bid tapes. But the flip side of that is you start to get all this information that we're passing, because from an investor standpoint, you're looking for any data point, where you can help identify a higher returning loan, something that's going to prepay slower. So the bid tape, number of fields in the bid tape has grown quite dramatically. And one of those initial ones was just the property address. And this, really come from the depositories that have those CRA requirements. Hey, if we can get the property address in the bid tape, we can start to pay up for loans that are in our footprint that we need to buy for our CRA requirements. So, it's a good thing for everybody. Lender, get paid up, if you're originating in that footprint. And now most recently, right, you've got kind of AMI based pricing, things like borrower income that are needed in the tape. So you've got a really granular data that's being passed through in these bid tapes, but obviously at the time this was all going through email, and so we recognized that early. Like to Phil's point, we've really helped to change the landscape of how loans are being bought, and we introduced BAM in 2017 to really try and address the security risk, and at the time just do away with all the emailing of these bid tapes back and forth to the investors, and that's what provided the encryption in transit. No longer did sellers need to send these out to their investors. They could post the bids through BAM. Their investors have a portal to go in and download those, and now we don't have to worry about that being transmitted through email. But we've still got the issue of the NPI in the data files, what we'd call just having that issue, that security risk with data at rest, right? So now you've got all of your investors who have downloaded this file and now saving it somewhere on their servers so that they can run through their pricing engine. So you still have that issue. And not only that, we'll show you a graph here on the next page, but what Phil was alluding to, we've kind of grown from an average number of 3 to 5 investors 10 years ago to now we're over 20, and that's just an average. So we have a lot of lenders who are literally sending out 30 plus bids to all their different investors. So that's just that risk is growing exponentially, leaving that MPI in the bid tape. And we recognized that early on.
Justin, just being the guy wearing the tie and glasses here, let me just say, of course, we know that all of the lenders on this call have evaluated their counterparty risk with their approved buyers of their loans, their lenders, and we're not saying at all here that everybody isn't taking the strides to protect that data, but it's just exposure in general of having that data live in multiple places.
Yeah, exactly. And we know some of the, hackers out there are most sophisticated in the world, and it's, just daily you're reading about, breaches for some very large companies that have, vast amounts of resources to try to protect this. So it's, it's almost a question of, if not when. So, but yeah, great point, Chris. And so to Phil's point, 2018, we developed our own geocoder, recognizing this extra layer of risk with having all of these tapes sitting around, pushing for that MSA level adoption where for your MCT clients, you'll notice in the bid tape we actually provide all the MSA track level info in lieu of or in addition to the property addresses currently, and that really dates back to 2018. We've tried to make that push. The issue at that time was, the technology from, really from everybody's standpoint, but, for the aggregators, just didn't have the ability to process the bid tapes, without the property address. Either their in-house tech or third-party solutions, couldn't accommodate. And, Phil mentioned this earlier, but I think, now with some of the advancements in technology, some of the mandates from FHFA on the AMI-based pricing have kind of forced folks to upgrade their technology. So the industry's now at a better point to adopt this. And again, I think recent events in our space have been pretty public on some security breaches. I think are kind of lighting a fire under most, and we have a lot of clients, Chris will speak to this, later. But there's a lot more motivation now from that standpoint. So, David, if you want to hit the next slide, we'll kind of show this graph here just briefly here, so you guys can see the history of. This is for MCT clients, just the average number of bids they're receiving, whole loan bids on their sales. So, pretty much other than the brief dip during COVID, that's done nothing but increase. And even in 23, we're still continuing to see that grow slightly. So, just highlights that kind of exponential risk you've got with that many of your parties, having all of that information. Dave, why don't you take it to the next slide? We'll kind of talk through here. All right, so what are we going to do? We've been talking this. Really, it's as simple as stripping out, mainly the property address, but also the loan number as well. We'll talk about that, but that's really kind of the last remaining piece of NPI in the bid tape that if we can strip out, essentially will protect all of that data at rest. So just those bid files that have been downloaded, by all of your investors throughout the course of them trying to provide bids back to you. And one of the other benefits that Phil hit on was really just I think everybody can agree, from in a perfect world, right? Only the winning investor should have perfect information on that loan, meaning the property address. So to the extent that we can facilitate the bids with enough information to allow all the prospective buyers to, give their most granular, sharpest price on there without actually disclosing that information, that's kind of a perfect scenario for everybody. And we're in a position to do that, to strip out that property address and still provide the tract level information that would still allow the investors to put the appropriate price on the bid without again exposing that. So
and Justin, just to add to that, look, in 2018, we did bring this potential up of hey, if you've got this loan, going out on 20 bid tapes to 20 investors, there's, by definition, there's 19 investors that are not going to win that loan. And there's not just from a data security standpoint, there's also the origination standpoint of, does that provide, some sort of, frankly, impairment on that MSR value for the actual buyer of the loan? We definitely got some responses of, Phil, you're creating a boogeyman out there. Understandable. But look, as you fast forward 5 years, everyone on this call, every organization on this call understands the value of data, understands the value of what, some in the industry will refer to as exhaust data. There are no specific provisions that are in from the MLPAs that we've seen. So it would, I think most on this call would understand that, there are a lot of buyers from, who do have origination platforms. Some buyers would say that, that's unethical, and that's great. But the bottom line is that there's no question that if there aren't, there aren't solid kind of guardrails put on that, you are going to have a transmission of this data, specifically because there's just nothing. Again, these potential buyers they're not sending this outside of their organization. So I think that I guess my point is that whereas this might not have been an issue in 2018, you fast forward now, just the level of value that is put on data across all industries, especially ours. I think we can all agree that this is, if it's not an issue, it will be an issue. So another reason to, kind of try to, eliminate that perfect data going out on that loan to those that don't actually buy the loan. Sorry, Justin.
Yeah. No. Well said, Phil. And I think, the other kind of missing piece there is just kind of removing the loan number from the bid, which we can do, and we've got what we call our MCT ID, which is MCT's unique loan number on the file, that investors can use in place of kind of the unique loan ID that is coming out of everybody's LOS system. So, we get those two out of there, and now the buyer bid level can be returned with that MCT ID, and we can still match that up. I know Chris will kind of speak to some of those additional fields and maybe some examples of what he's doing with some of our lenders at the time. But really, this is going to be really a collaboration with the investor community on getting there. For some, it's not an issue. For others, it means changing their processes they have in place. To be able to utilize the geocode data that's provided on the bid tapes through the platform. So it's again, it's really going to be a collaboration with us and the investor community to really get everybody, the industry as a whole, in frankly, I think what everybody can agree on would be a better spot to have those excluded from the bid tape. So I think maybe Phil, unless you didn't have anything to add to that, maybe we'll pass it off to Chris here to kind of talk about some of the how we handle data here at MCT.
That was great, Justin.
Well, let me tell you guys, if you thought that was exciting, let's just wait until we start getting into this sort of stuff here. But what Phil and Justin both did a great job is sort of laying the framework for an initiative that takes the data that contains sort of limited NPI and then really decreases the way in which your hedge advisory firm is passing that data on. Again, it's to your approved counterparties, but you're passing it to one person who's now passing it to, say, 20 different investor counterparties. And so we want to be clear that we actually do at MCT give you an opportunity to actually send no NPI at all. So for clients that are able, what you can actually do is omit any borrower first and last name. You can omit the property address. We can work on assigning those MCT IDs instead of instead of LOS specific loan numbers. But what you do need to be able to do is pass the geocode information such as MSA code, state code, county code, census tract in lieu of those data points. As it is now, we really strive to take very little NPI to begin with. So often when I'll have conversations with vendor management teams, or as you can imagine with some of the transitions that have been going on over the spring and summer from different hedge advisory firms, MCT's been in a position to answer an awful lot of questions about our data security program in general. And we were actively working with several clients to actually restrict all NPI at the point that we connect to their proprietary data warehouse or their data lake, or through an LOS integration, or through one of the proprietary APIs that we built out with different clients. We maintain 13 or 14 standard integrations across a lot of the different loan origination systems, and then dozens of, like I said, proprietary API connections to warehouses or data lakes. But what we're able to do is eliminate any NPI at that point. So you're passing, data that you're kind of agnostic to. Now, that doesn't at all remove MCT from the responsibility of treating your data just as if it contained incredibly heavy NPI. Now, most of you on the call are familiar that, look, we're not collecting social security numbers or credit card numbers or bank account numbers to begin with. But if you have a combination of a borrower last name, a property address that, you're getting a loan on, an investor loan number, some other details, DTI, household income, those sorts of things, the combination of all of those absolutely can constitute NPI. Admittedly, it's limited NPI, but it's still NPI. So, one of the things we've talked about here a few different times, and you can sort of see a workflow here. It's pretty small, but what we've included here is just a list of typical fields. So we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of fields, and we can provide any of this information to you in a follow-up. But the other nice thing here is sort of a typical data workflow. And again, we're connecting through one of those methods that we discussed. We're pulling all of that information into our AWS environment. We're going to talk a little bit more about the environments that MCT maintains shortly, but and Phil, feel free to jump in here. I know you're an expert here in some cases where I'm not quite as smart as you. Doesn't happen often, but every once in a while it gets me, guys. But what's nice about this is all that data transport is encrypted in transit, like Phil said, and then wherever feasible, we're encrypting it at rest as well. So Phil mentioned some opportunities where a user might export, an Excel spreadsheet or export a CSV, or once data is leaving our purview, we aren't in control of it, so we can't, certify what's happening to that data beyond us. But again, wherever feasible, we're always encrypting that data both in transit and at rest. And in most cases, that data is all living in our AWS environment. In some cases, if there's some extra work being done on your data, it may be transferred down to the MCT local area network, and we'll talk a little bit about how we protect both of those environments. We're going to jump into that now, but Phil or Justin, did you guys have anything to add about just the ability to work with our integrations team to sort of limit the amount of NPI that you're passing, from the very get-go? Is there anything you wanted to add to that, sir?
No, I think that obviously was a detailed overview, Chris. I think that just to kind of tail into what Chris was saying about the some lender customers of ours already asking for this. You definitely can. I think, again, this is more me now talking to the investors on the line, the buyers on the line. Chris is right. We have seen this request from, more and more lenders, which we are perfectly fine with. One thing that has to occur between the lender and the actual end buyer, of course, is that when the loan is actually committed, there needs to be, obviously transition of data for transmission of data. For for your loan registration at that particular investor, and then obviously the normal ULDD and everything in delivery down the road. But we definitely can omit that at the outset. One issue I would say is that we, because of the value that exists for that FTHB AMI borrower, sub median area median income borrower, we definitely, while we would rather in a perfect world not get any of the data, we definitely do send it through our APIs and our geocoder, so that we can get those values back. But so in a perfect world, you probably would send us the data, and then we would get obviously the geocode information, the AMI information on that geocode, so that it can be compared obviously to the income, and then that is transmitted to the 20 potential buyers. But yeah. Chris is absolutely right. We've had a lot of requests for that, and completely respect that, and we can, we are very happy to accommodate remove the onus on us from having that data.
Absolutely. And, the other thing I think that we've seen too, much like with the evolution of the number of investors that folks are adding into their best execution, is frankly the quality of the data that we're receiving from our lender clients as well. If we go back to 2018 and we looked up geocode information, the state code, county code, census tract, MSA, most times that information was not really available out of the client's raw data. And now we're seeing with a lot of clients that it is in fact available. And so it gets us one step closer to being able to work with you to both balance the achievement of your best execution, of course, but with, balancing that with data security. So David, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide. And I don't know if we introduced David Ring, who's running this all behind the scenes. He's one of our senior managers in our marketing team. David, thank you so much for all of your help here. So here's some highlights just in general from MCT's, data security standpoint. And again, as Phil mentioned, some of you may have already heard some of this from an internal client webinar that we did, but I was not dressed this nicely and we didn't have Phil Rasori. So with those two things, you can't get any better than that. So when you look at just threats in general, it comes down to attack surfaces. At MCT, we maintain two centralized work environments. There's our AWS environment, which we talked about a little bit before, and then there's our local San Diego headquarter server environment as well. Just so, kind of everybody understands, now that we have a hybrid workforce, this started with COVID, where we had to kind of increase our security posture as it related to remote work. And so the only way for one of our employees to log into our local area network is through a multi-factor authentication into what's called an SSL VPN. So that's a secure encrypted tunnel that allows them to access our file server. And they actually have to go through not one, but two multi-factor authentications, both on their MCT managed device, because we're only allowing anybody to connect to our environment from an MCT managed device that lives in their remote location. So they've got dual factor there. Then they establish an SSL VPN with another separate dual factor authentication process. So we're pretty strict about how folks remote in. But when you look at our local area environment versus our Amazon Web Services environment, the biggest thing that we have is a decrease in employees that have actual access to affect anything. We have 100 plus employees that have to have access to our local area network, whereas, and Phil would know exactly, but it's a half dozen folks that have access to our Amazon Web Services environment that can actually change anything. And the dynamics of those folks are, senior admin, Linux admin, or, Windows admin type folks that are working directly for Rasori maintaining our applications, or directly for me and our data integration services team maintaining all of our integrations. So just in general, you go from 100 plus potential threats down to, a half dozen potential threats, and that in itself really scales down our risk. On top of that, we do what every lender and every counterparty does here. We're very careful about who we hire. We provide, obviously background checks before anybody works here. We evaluate, kind of, is somebody suitable to be working with, sensitive client data. We do biannual information security training. There's new hire training. We do annual data privacy testing and training that everybody, including Phil and Justin and myself, all have to take. It's always a fun thing for us, but nonetheless, we treat it very seriously, and we recognize that these efforts are all kind of required to comply with your third-party vendor management standards. I just see the pegboard here is lighting up with questions about all of this exciting stuff. So I see Phil's eyes glazing over. So David, if you'll get me to the next slide here, I'll try to hustle through this for everybody and allow plenty of time for questions, and maybe we could even, I think I do see one question coming up, Phil, so maybe if you want to take a look at that, I'll go through this, or go ahead, Phil, sorry.
Oh, we can do, just because, Candace asked a question about, are we getting this from the LOS, these geocode fields from the LOS, or converting it, prior to sending out the tape. So that's a great question. We are converting this using our geocoder, and also truing that up. So using, pertinent APIs. So like again, I spoke earlier about the Freddie income limits API, where sending that data through that API will return geocode information and also the AMI information about that geocode so that we can compare the actual, the actual income that comes across on the loan versus the AMI and see if it hits, especially if it's a, if it's an FTHB
Yeah,
for the.
Bill,
For the
oh, sorry, Bill. Apologize, sir. So it's like I was saying, we have actually seen that some clients are able to provide some of this data directly from their LOS, or at least parts of it. So Candace, great to see your name there, and feel free to reach out to me directly, and we could talk a little bit about, hey, are there some additional fields you could be providing in lieu of certain data elements that are considered NPI? And I'm happy to kind of talk through that with you. But Phil, thanks so much for grabbing that question. Just another quick, highlight of data security that MCT does here. Of course, we have at least monthly, frankly, we do it weekly, vulnerability penetration scans of both our local area and our cloud environment. And that's provided by a third-party cyber risk assessment firm. We review all of those scans internally with the relevant stakeholders and obviously remediate any issues that come up. We have a third-party risk assessment audit of all of our local cloud and cloud environments, And what that's doing is that's a third set of eyes that's coming in and just looking at where are the holes, right? Are there any holes? Are there things we could be doing better? And this is a firm we've been working with for over a decade that has kind of grown and scaled with MCT's operations. And so that's, again, something that is a report that we do annually that we present to the executive management team, and it helps form our ongoing budgets and roadmaps and all of those types of things from a security posture. Of course, we go through a SOC 1 Type 2 and SOC 2 Type 2 audit now. Just a note, we'll actually be completing that audit in the first week of October this year so that our final reports can be available to everybody by the end of December or early January. That's been a request from a lot of clients. So we've restructured our normal calendar year audit period. So we'll be getting going on that audit here in just a few weeks. I'm always really fun to be around during those audits. Justin and Phil are looking forward to that. And then another thing, again, look, it's something that Phil really revels in because he's always hoping to get me on one of these, but we do spearfish, social engineering spearfish tests against all of our employees, every executive included, at least twice annually. And that's, again, done by a third party. And what we're trying to do there is trick our employees into giving up their credentials. And that's something that we really look at and we review. And, we kind of educate every employee that they're the front line in guarding our confidential data, our clients' confidential data. And so we take that serious, and it's part of your ongoing review process. So I think, those are some, some good high-end highlights there. David, I think our next slide is just moving on into any questions, right? Good, sir? Or did I forget something completely? Look at that. I even got it right here. So I'm sure you don't have any questions for this exciting guy, but, rarely do we get the brain trust of Mr. Rasori and Mr. Grant here. Any questions from anybody?
Well, Chris, that was a great overview. Definitely you always make a not so exciting topic very, very easy to listen to. And yeah, Chris is right about that spearfish testing. I haven't got them yet, but maybe we'll do one later today and see if we can catch them off this game.
Probably sent 3 while I've been on this webinar. I'll be watching.
No, I don't see any other questions. Justin, do you have any kind of closing thoughts?
No, I think I know, it's a review for a lot of the MCT clients on the line, but, obviously anybody on here, anybody listening to the recording afterwards can reach out to any one of us, with questions, and we'd be happy to go over, specific scenarios or questions on the data. So
yeah, I would just say, Phil, I obviously spoke that, any of our lender clients, please feel free to reach out to me, to my team. We'll work together on looking at your specific case. But I also really wanted to thank all of our investor partners out in the community that we know have engaged with us in the past, have continued to engage with us.
Yeah. No, that was good to bring up, Chris. I think for the investors on the line, and all of the lender clients on the line as well, I want to make sure that obviously we are We're execution centric, right? We are execution focused. We are not going to impair our customers' execution by forcing this change onto an investor that's working to make this change, but pushing it too fast. So we're gonna work with all investors. But look, I think everybody on the line here can see that this decision, this move, is on the right side of history. Full stop. That we have to continue to remove this MPI data, and again, the MSR effects, the potential EPO effects are kind of just added benefit of removing this data from that initial process, that initial post of the bid tape. Obviously, like we talked about a little bit, there's going to be transmission of data at the time of requested commitment. We didn't talk a ton about that, but there will be communication of data. But the point is that I think everybody can agree that there's a certain amount of data, things like name and property address, that really it's only the buyer that actually buys the loan really should be getting, provided that we can, through technology, through geocodes, through some of these APIs that the industry has access to now, provided that we can get that information so that we can get that sharp price. The bottom line is we shouldn't be sending around this data. So really want to thank Justin and Chris, and thank you all for joining our call here. And there will definitely be more webinars in the future, especially to our customers, but also to the industry as we talk about progress here as we go into the end of the year. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.